Pay attention to the man entering the lobby camera. He thought he was doing the right thing. A long night, an empty road, one man asking for help. The truck driver trusted him, and that single decision would nearly cost him everything. What started as a routine haul turned into a nightmare no one saw coming. No warning signs, no raised voices, just a handshake, a promise, and a ride that should have ended quietly. But behind that calm smile was a secret that stayed hidden until one camera caught something no one was supposed to see. Seconds later, the truth exploded into the open. Lies unraveled, motives were exposed, and the man everyone trusted wasn't who he claimed to be. If that camera hadn't been there, this story would have ended very differently. What did it capture? Why did the driver freeze when he saw the footage? And how close did he come to becoming the next victim? Stay with us, because once you see what that camera revealed, you'll never look at a simple act of trust the same way again. At 2:17 a.m. on October 14, 2019, a security camera mounted above a loading bay door recorded a white box truck idling longer than usual. The engine ran. The headlights stayed off. After 90 seconds, the driver's door opened. No one stepped out. At 2:19 a.m., the camera captured a second figure approaching from the shadows, moving with purpose. The footage would later be played in court frame by frame. At the time, no one was watching. The location was an industrial park on the east edge of Davenport, Iowa, a cluster of warehouses separated by chain-link fences and unlit access roads. The obvious explanation at first was simple: a routine overnight delivery gone wrong, a tired driver, a mechanical failure, an accident. Investigators would challenge that assumption before sunrise. The man behind the wheel was Daniel Harlow, 42, a long-haul truck driver with 2 decades on the road. He was scheduled to drop palletized auto parts at the Bayview Logistics warehouse between 1 and 3 a.m. He never checked in. At 6:38 a.m., a warehouse supervisor called 911 to report a truck blocking the bay door. Inside the cab, Daniel was slumped forward, seatbelt fastened. He was unresponsive. Paramedics arrived at 6:46 a.m. They pronounced him dead on the scene. No signs of a crash, no visible trauma. The cab smelled faintly of diesel and something metallic. The initial thought was a medical event. Daniel's, perhaps. He had worked long hours. He was overweight. The coroner was notified. But as officers began to secure the scene, one detail stood out. The truck's ignition was on, but the gear selector was in park. Someone had turned the engine back on after it stopped. Daniel Harlow's life followed a steady rhythm. He grew up in rural Illinois, graduated high school, and went straight to work. He married at 24, divorced at 31, and raised a daughter who now lived with her mother in Peoria. He drove because it paid reliably and because he understood the road. He was known among dispatchers as dependable. He kept a notebook of routes and rest stops, handwritten in neat block letters. He called his daughter every Sunday night. On the evening of October 13th, Daniel picked up his load in Joliet at 6:15 p.m. He texted his dispatcher at 6:14 p.m., rolling. His last phone call was at 9:42 p.m., a 5-minute conversation with a man saved in his contacts as Marcus. Phone records would later show this was the 3rd call between them that week. Marcus Reed was 38, a former trucker Daniel had met at a regional freight company years earlier. The two had stayed in touch after Marcus left trucking for warehouse consulting. He talked often about side opportunities, about using industry knowledge to make extra money. Daniel listened. He had recently fallen behind on child support after an injury kept him off the road for 3 weeks. Money was tight. In late September, Marcus proposed a plan. It was framed as simple. Daniel would park overnight at Bayview Logistics as usual. Marcus, who claimed to be advising the warehouse on security, would meet him briefly to collect a package. No paperwork, no delays.
"They know me," Marcus had said, according to messages later recovered. The payment was $2,500 in cash. Daniel hesitated. He asked if it was legal. Marcus replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a message, "It's clean." The hidden motive was money, but not in the way Daniel understood it. Bayview Logistics stored high-value electronics in a secured cage within the warehouse. Marcus had learned the delivery schedules and blind spots during a short consulting contract the previous year, and he also knew that an overnight truck provided cover. If something went wrong, suspicion would fall on the driver. The planning unfolded quietly. On October 9th at 3:21 p.m., Marcus purchased a prepaid phone. At 4:07 p.m., he transferred $1,800 from a savings account to a checking account in the name of his girlfriend, then withdrew it in cash over 2 days. On October 12th, he drove to Davenport and checked into a motel 3 miles from the industrial park. Surveillance footage later placed him there at 8:59 p.m., carrying a small duffel bag. On October 13th at 11:58 p.m., Marcus texted Daniel, "Same spot, Back Bay, kill headlights." Daniel replied at 12:01 a.m., "Copy." He did not know that Marcus had already cut a section of the chain-link fence behind the warehouse earlier that evening, hidden by a stack of pallets. The crime unfolded in minutes. At 2:14 a.m., Daniel backed the truck into position. He shut off the engine. He waited. At 2:18 a.m., Marcus approached the driver's side. He knocked twice, a prearranged signal. Daniel unlocked the door. What Daniel did not know was that Marcus had brought more than a package. The duffel bag contained a compact pry bar, zip ties, and a syringe preloaded with a veterinary sedative Marcus had obtained months earlier through a contact. He believed it would incapacitate quickly. He had tested the dose on himself at home, a detail investigators would later find in search history. At 2:19 a.m., the security camera captured Marcus climbing into the cab. The angle did not show their faces. Inside, words were exchanged. No one heard them. At 2:21 a.m., the camera recorded a brief rocking of the truck, then stillness. Daniel was conscious long enough to struggle. He did not unbuckle his seatbelt. Marcus exited the cab at 2:24 a.m. He walked around the truck and opened the passenger door, retrieving the duffel bag. He wiped the driver's door handle with a cloth. He turned the ignition back on. He left the headlights off. He disappeared through the cut fence at 2:26 a.m. They don't know this yet, but a second camera was watching. Mounted on a neighboring warehouse, a privately owned camera faced the access road. It captured Marcus's face as he crossed the road under a flickering light. The timestamp was clear. The image was sharp. The investigation shifted when the medical examiner ruled the death a homicide at 1:12 p.m. on October 14. The sedative was identified in Daniel's bloodstream at a level inconsistent with medical use. There were needle marks on his upper arm, partially obscured by his jacket. The engine had been restarted after his heart stopped. Detectives canvassed the area. They collected footage from 6 cameras. Most showed nothing useful. One showed the white box truck. Another showed a shadow. The private camera showed Marcus. It took 2 days to identify him. Phone records connected Marcus to Daniel in the days before the death. Cell tower data placed Marcus near the warehouse at the time of the crime. When officers interviewed him on October 17th at 10:03 a.m., he denied being in Davenport that night. He said he had been home. He said he had not spoken to Daniel in months. At 10:47 a.m., detectives showed him the footage. Marcus stared at the screen. He said nothing. At 10:51 a.m., he asked for a lawyer. A search warrant executed that afternoon at Marcus's apartment uncovered the duffel bag, the pry bar, and the prepaid phone, wiped but not clean. In the trunk of his car, officers found residue matching the sedative. Bank records showed the cash withdrawals. Text messages, deleted but recoverable, outlined the plan. The theory that Daniel had been complicit in theft collapsed under the weight of evidence. There was no stolen cargo. The warehouse cage had not been breached. Marcus had intended to use Daniel as cover, but panicked when Daniel questioned the plan inside the cab. The sedative was a contingency. Control had become the motive. The trial began on June 8, 2021. Prosecutors walked the jury through the timeline minute by minute. They played the camera footage. They showed the messages. They repeated the time, 2:19 a.m. They returned to it again and again. The defense argued that Daniel had agreed to an illegal exchange and that the death was accidental. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On June 18th, Marcus Reed was convicted of first-degree murder and attempted theft. He was sentenced to life without parole. Daniel Harlow was buried in Peoria on a rainy afternoon. His daughter spoke briefly at the service. She said her father trusted people. She said he believed in doing his job well. The warning at the end of this case is quiet and unromantic. Trust is a form of currency. In industries built on schedules and handshakes, it moves easily. It can also be exploited. One camera changed everything. Most do not.